Hello to everyone at home and welcome to Mixed Media Films panel discussion. My name is Samah Ali and I am so blessed to be your moderator today. I would probably look familiar from some other sessions and it's just because I'm amazing and great at talking with people. My Mercury is in Gemini, so I'm not surprised about this, but here we are. Some things about me. I program for a lot of festivals, Hot Docs Film Festival being one of them, Hot Springs Film Festival being one of them, and also Doc NYC. So, I just love to talk. I love to watch movies, and I'm, very privileged to be in this space today with some Canadian filmmakers that we're going to have a lovely conversation with in just a bit. But before we actually dive into this dynamic conversation, I want to recognize the land that I am streaming from, but more importantly, I want to encourage you all to do the same. So today I'm coming from Lenape-Hoking, also known as Land of the Lenape, a people descended from the greater Algonquin Nation, whose lands now expand to what is present day known as Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York. After forced removal, wars, and treaties, Lenape now live in different parts of New York, and it is important for myself as a second-generation settler to Turtle Island, and more importantly, a first-generation settler to Lenape-Hoking, to recognize the people and the land that I'm actually, residing on today. Real World Film Festival is located on the traditional territory of the Wendat, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Métis, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. But because this is an online event, I do understand that my land acknowledgement and Real World's land acknowledgement is not going to apply to everybody who is watching from the comfort of their own homes. And so what I ask for you to do is get aware and to head to native-land.ca for you to learn more about the land that you reside on and what local initiatives that you can actually be contributing to. Peace and reconciliation is not something that can just be said. It's something that involves action and does also not involve a cookie. So make sure you know not only whose land you reside on, but also how you can get involved in their community and take action, because it takes all of us. And with that, I want to, welcome everybody else who's in this room as well. We're here because of this conversation inspired by Echoes and Comb Sister. And I would love for everyone to go around and share a little bit more about themselves and their backgrounds as to how they got where they are today. I'll start with Taien.
Hi, everyone. My name is Taien Ng-Chan, coming to you from Treaty 3 territory, otherwise known as Hamilton, Ontario. And I'm a professor at York University. I think I'm part of this panel because my work involves a lot of mixed media, different platforms, anything from video, film, 360, VR, projection, mapping. I do a little bit of all of it, as well as writing. So hopefully contribute my expertise in the field of mixed media and mixed genres to this panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Taien. Raghed.
Hi, my name is Raghed Charabaty. I'm a filmmaker, producer. I'm a graduate from the York University MFA film program, where I met Atefeh, and I was the sound designer on Atefeh's animation Comb Sister.
And with that, Atefeh.
Hi, I'm Atefeh Khademolreza, an Iranian-Canadian filmmaker, and I'm the director of Comb Sister. Thank you so much for inviting me to your panel. Yeah.
Thank you for being here, Atefeh, and hello to your cat as well. I have my cats decorated around me. This is what happens when we're at home. We're welcome into your personal space, and so cats will want to partake in the conversation as well. I want to tap some more folks to get involved in this conversation. Andrew.
Hi, I'm Andrew Seok. I am the writer-director of Echoes, and I am a filmmaker, composer, theater creator, and record producer, and I'm sure a few other things, but let's leave it at that for now.
Thanks, Andrew. And Jeff.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jeff Madden. I am an actor, also an educator, and a father, and a husband. I am in Oakville, Ontario, and I was performing as an actor in Andrew's film Echoes.
Again, such a privilege to be here. We're going to get into a very, sporadic, exciting, and, interesting conversation today. And, one of the first things I want to ask everybody here is, what does mixed media work mean to you? And have you experimented in the format prior to the project that you're currently involved in? Or for you, Tan, actually being here on this panel, because you have mentioned that you've done quite a bit of work in the past. Let's start with Atefeh.
Mixed media for me is like using different form of arts and getting all them together, like collage, like assemblage, like music, sounds, and interior decoration, and then put them all them together and create whatever you want, what kind of image you have in your mind, and then visualize them while you are recording them. Also, it is not only, this kind of forum arts is not only during the production, but also after production in the process of post-production. So you can add like painting to your footage and mediate the things that you have in your hands by adding different kinds of art forms and make them more close to whatever you have in your mind.
Does anyone else want to jump in? Yeah.
Yeah. When it comes to making work, especially in the pandemic, when it's hard to get access to a big crew or to a big cast, you have to get creative and you have to start filming in more interesting ways and include other forms of media to create your final product. And if you think about it, cinema itself is a mixed media format. It requires performance and literature and lighting. And so when you start to think of cinema as a mixed medium itself, it becomes less odd or less experimental to incorporate things like water tanks, miniature sets, compositing, painting on screen, which are all things that Atefeh and I do together. And during COVID, we produced 3 animated short films, including Comb Sister. And so, yeah, it opens your mind when you start to think of cinema that way.
Andrew.
It's an interesting conversation because I don't actually see, or I should say, I don't subscribe necessarily to any kind of definition of mixed media per se. As Raghed said, it's all mixed media. Everything we do is mixed media. So if we're working on a film that requires you to paint on the footage, then that is what worked for that footage. That is what worked for that scene, for that moment, to create that piece of art, to tell that story that we're trying to tell. So for me, it's just a question of what works. In a lot of films, it would be very odd to all of a sudden have animation in the middle of the film. But in certain instances, it might be perfect. It might work. It'd be exactly what the scene requires. So for me, mixed media is just what works, and let's use every tool in our arsenal to make it work.
Taien.
I love that. I love starting from the place where you're all like, everything's mixed media. Just use what is important and works in your work. And because my own practice is very interdisciplinary, right? So what I find really refreshing is to think about the kind of media that has, what does it bring to a project? So Andrew, you're bringing musicals, right, into film, into certain things that we don't think of as musical, and bringing mixing those conventions. So it's not just media, not just the media that you're mixing, but also genre and those conventions of genre. So that's something that I'd like to hear a little bit more about, right? Is like why because media, we can use any media, as you've all said, but genre has certain rules that I find is interesting when you break those rules. So maybe we could talk a little bit more about the mixed genre in the mixed media.
Yeah, that's my next question. So you have totally predicted exactly where I wanted to go. And I also, on that same note, I kind of want to inspire whomever wants to talk next. What is brought to life and is seen on screen when we do involve more artistic expression in cinema? Anyone want to speak first? Yes, Raghed.
When it comes to Comb Sister, for example, when Ati was creating the story, we were talking, and she was really excited about the fact of bringing, it's a hybrid story, and therefore it's a hybrid genre. Some of the footage in the film is filmed and then reanimated on top of, or composited with other backgrounds. So the format is a hybrid between live action and animation, but also the story is a hybrid between a documentary and a fictive approach to the story, by merging a real issue with a fairy tale. So in a way, that's also a sort of genre bending that adds to the animation, and without it, the animation would be lacking. It needed that sort of truth and reality to be compelling, and it needed that fictionalization to work as an animation and to be exciting in that format as well.
Mm-hmm. It also adds that layer, like literal layer and texture to the film. That's really, really interesting. Atefeh, do you have anything to add about what Raghed just said?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I just want to go back to the COVID and the situation that I was in it. I thought I will go to China and then I will make a documentary, but I couldn't, and I wasn't in Canada, and I needed to be creative and find my way. How do I want to make it and make it interesting and beautiful, and also tell my own story, mixing it with the reality and adding some fantasy in it. So I decided to use rotoscopy, and then during the process, I understand, I want to use very local painting that show their culture. So I searched among their painting, finding them, and then I was like, I don't want to use exactly this painting. I want to do collage. So I did collage. And the things that I want to say is that during the process of creation of a film or whatever, even any art, you are doing experience and finding your way gradually. It's like, it's not very sudden. It's like it happened gradually during the process. So sometimes from the beginning we decide what kind of genre we want to do, but sometimes it will change during the way that we are making our film.
So you'd have to be open to that flexibility.
Yeah.
I
see that you wanted to respond.
Yeah, I wanted to add that when the film was being made and animated, me working on it as a sound designer, Atefeh as the director, the writer, the animator, and the producer being based in China, in Beijing, and the producer had her own team of people who were filming. It was also really interesting how me as a Lebanese person, Ati as an Iranian Canadian, and our producer in China as a Chinese artist, coming together and creating this new work that touches on both the director's vision and the producer's vision to create something new, because they have a common shared experience relating to the theme of Comb Sister. So that was also really interesting. And we never met, the producer, Atefeh and I never met in person, so everything was done collaboratively online.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not sure that it is related to our conversation or not, but language is also very important, because my producer, she couldn't speak English well, and most of the time we didn't have translator, but how we communicate together was so interesting. And then I learned that painting, I mean, drawing, making a storyboard is a kind of solution for us to communicate together.
Wow. Does anyone want to jump in on this? Jeff, Andrew, Taien? Yeah, Andrew.
Jeff can talk about this a bit more than I can, but in terms of the genre blending, as Taien mentioned, again, I think it kind of falls into that category of what works and what doesn't work. And if these two genres happen to blend, then great. And there were plenty of times in this musical. So this musical originally was a stage production that Jeff was in, and he can speak to that. And there were things that did and did not work in the film. I can't tell you why, but just conceptually they didn't work. So we had to swap them or change them. Jeff, you want to mention the character swap?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Andrew and I go back a long way, and this Echoes goes back a long way. And I think when we did the stage production of Echoes, working in, you know, a theater, there are certain conventions that need to happen to help the audience connect to the piece, you know, from a distance and all of that. So I played a particular character that was essentially a little bit like a narrator character or a time traveler. Echoes is a film about that sort of takes place across many different time eras and 3 different wars, and sort of the themes of you know, relationships and the struggles that people will or try to overcome for love and all of that. And so my character kind of helped in a theater sort of draw the through line through that, so the audience can understand the plot a little bit more and understand where we're going with it. But on film, if you do something like that, it ends up kind of putting the film into sort of like a sci-fi or a fantasy, because you've got some character that's kind of traveling between times and eras and locations, and so that didn't work. You know, Andrew was, you know, pretty aware of that and decided not to have that character in the film. And so I ended up playing another character in the film. And interestingly, though, some of the songs and themes that Andrew had written for the first character, for the narrator character, he was able to take little pieces of those and, you know, put them into other characters' story arcs. So some of the thematic material survived, but in a different way inside the film. And I don't know, I just find that really, really fascinating. And as an artist, it's really thrilling to see, first of all, to be involved in something like that, but then also as an audience member to see something that is mixing these two genres together in a, you know, really kind of innovative and new way. It's just kind of thrilling, you know?
And I'll chime in also to say that one of the producers, Shane, a great friend of mine, and we have a lot of creative chats about this stuff. And when I started on the film, he said to me a piece of advice that I'll take with every project, because he had been a filmmaker before, and he said, no matter what you do, make it good. If it's a 31-minute piece, then it's a 31-minute piece. If it's a 6-hour piece and it's great, then it's great. But don't try to make it a certain length to try and fit a certain box. Just every decision you make it work. And if it doesn't work, then scrap it. So that's why the movie ended up being 65 minutes and not 90 minutes, for example, because 90 minutes would have required a completely different kind of story, which may or may not have worked. And what we had, I felt, did work, so we went with it.
That is really interesting. I appreciate you sharing that. Taien, I want to get you involved because, you know, you already assumed and knew that this question was coming. So I want to get your thoughts on how different art expressions can offer more to not just the screen, but also various and mixed media genres.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, first of all, I think that there's too much focus on what one genre or one medium can do, right? That if you're, for instance, if people are like, this is a musical, so you can only do these things. But if you mix it, and there's a lot of that going on nowadays, right? Like musical / noir film or all sorts of crazy mixed things. And I think a lot of people are starting to get over what using one genre or one medium could mean, and experimenting a lot more. So I'm loving seeing that in general. And with these films, like with Andrew's film, I mean, what I would like to ask Andrew and Jeff is, what did you feel? Like you mentioned like some things didn't work in moving from theater to film, or seeing how those genres could mix up together. And I'm interested to see what you felt didn't work and how you address those, because often the move from theater to film is really tricky, right? Moving from a stage to one location, people interacting in one space, to something that is much more loose, much more image-based. So I'd like to hear from that, but also from Atefeh and Raghed, working in mixing in the animation and folk tales, and commenting on women's issues, for instance, right? Like, so what is all that mix? Where did that come from? What does that mean? I'm just interested in what you all have to say. That's like my my role here as well.
Andrew, Jeff, do you want to go first, and then Atefeh and Raghed after?
Sure, I'll jump in. I kind of, I always equate everything to food because I love eating, and so, you know, if someone said to me they're gonna make an ice cream that's flavored with like a sriracha flavored ice cream, for example, I might go, oh, actually that could work, that might be interesting, you know, maybe not, but you'd kind of have to just try it and see, does it work, does it not work? And then it might not work, but hey, if you add honey to it, maybe then it's great. And that was really kind of how we went about Echoes, and we did a lot of reshooting for that reason. The way you have a suspension of belief in theater, you know, someone sitting on a chair and we tell them that he's in a throne or she's in a mountain, you believe it because you're told. In a film, it's not. You have to see it to believe it. So, for example, one big change we did was there were two actors, let's say, who played slave owners in the Civil War, generals in World War I, and politicians in World War II. And these characters were the same actors in all three time periods. And they were the comedic relief. They were the satire, the dark black humor, which was much needed in the show. But to put those characters into this film would have been like putting in Jerry Lewis and Schindler's List. It didn't work to tell the story. It told a completely different kind of story, like Jeff mentioned about the postman time traveling. It would have made it a sci-fi. So there were things like that that basically we took on a case-by-case basis of what will work, what won't work, and what's going to create the film that we want to create. And to your point, Taien, a lot of filmmakers I find when making musicals, they kind of assume that it will transfer and translate. And I don't think many things will in any genre. Like if you're taking an animation and turning it into a live stage show, there's going to have to be changes made to make that work.
Jeff, anything to add to what Andrew mentioned?
Yeah, I certainly don't have much to add, but I can think of, you know, commercial musicals like I know that, for example, Dirty Dancing was a very, you know, very famous movie, of course, and they turned it into a stage musical, but it was derided by most critics and artists because of that reason. They chose to stick to that exact script from the film, and they were like, no, that worked in the film, so we're going to do that on stage. And it just did not, because, you know, even in film, you can have a two-line scene, cut to another two-line scene, cut to another two-line scene, and all that. But if you do that on stage, it just doesn't work. The audience is like, where am I going? What's going on? So, yeah, I certainly don't have much to add about Echoes, other than the fact that as an actor, certainly switching genres obviously changes how you are to perform. And as an actor, that's one of the trickiest thing to do. Like one day you're singing a song for a 1,000-seat theater, and then the next day, the camera is 3 feet away from you. And if you perform them the same way, they do not translate. And that's very challenging to do, but it's a nice challenge. So I'll just sort of leave it at that.
Just on that note, before I get Raghed into this conversation, Jeff, when you were acting on a stage, obviously in theater you have to be much larger, much grander for it to boom to that 1,000-person audience. Did you find that when you had to transition to a film space that you had to be more minute in your acting?
Yep, absolutely. In this particular case with Echoes, there was quite a bit of a time difference between the stage production and the filming. And also for my particular case, I was playing different characters. So, yeah, the changes weren't, as massive, I suppose, as they would have been or could have been if I was playing the same character. And it was back-to-back kind of thing. But yes, it's a challenge, and you do have to check yourself. And the only way what you're looking like is to ask the director, hey, can I take a look at that after you've shot that scene? And if your eyeballs tell you, oh, that's too much, you've got to simplify, tone down, just think the thoughts, don't show them, that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's a constant struggle.
He was a huge pain in the ass.
Thanks.
That's hilarious. Raghed, I would love to get you in. You were keen to jump in about your question.
Yeah, I wanted to, because Ati and I also had a food-related analogy, and it's when making Comb Sister, for example, because it's a mix of documentary and fiction. It's based on a real story, but it's also fictionalized. It also has a prologue and an epilogue that situate the fictional story in the real world. So it bends genre and medium, because also with the footage that's filmed and then animated, and then the backgrounds are composited and animated, and the sound design. We realized that it wasn't just about mixing things together and hoping for the best. And the food analogy we had, it was like, if you just wanted a banana, you can have a banana. And that's like, if you want to make a thriller feature, you're making a thriller feature. But when you're mixing things together and you want to make a fruit salad, there are rules. You can't put everything in a fruit salad, and you have to match things together. And so it was really interesting to watch her work, and for me as a sound designer to understand the role of audio, because it wasn't just diegetic audio, or it wasn't an accompaniment only, but it was also balancing out the narration and telling the story through the design, to complement what was happening, and to also give it full fiction and full documentary energy as we're going along. It was an interesting process, and I find Atefeh found the really the perfect middle line to complement both. So it was really impressive to be part of that process.
I love all the food analogies you all have going. It's really illustrative, right? Especially the sriracha and honey ice cream, which ooh, it could be delicious. It might not be. I think that's maybe a summary of of this panel, is like, yeah, all the different flavors that we could put in, and it could be delicious. We certainly hope it is. Sometimes it might not work. Ice cream especially, right? Like spicy ice cream, that would be quite something.
I want to talk about editing, because I think I have so much to unpack with this, but with both of these films, like sound design, scoring, and obviously the layers in Comb Sister, for example, that requires a great deal of intricacy when it comes to mixing everything together. And Taien, I want you to get into this conversation as well, because even in writing, when you are like having mixed forms of writing, editing can be very difficult with that too, because you don't know which principles or which rules will trump the others. So I would love to get to know how that editing process was like for both films. Andrew, I'm going to assume that you can speak more to that with Echoes, but then also, how did you find a balance to be able to be free in that expression as well as what mixed media work usually allows and encourages? Atefeh, I want to start with you.
Okay, yeah. For me, editing is rewriting the script. So I have some material on my table, and right now I want to start writing. I mean, telling my story. And definitely having enough knowledge about editing software, and also different kind of them, like Photoshop, like Premiere, and mix them together, having this ability and knowledge to mix them together, and then using different software to do your editing as the other steps. Yeah, and I think I started to do editing, and then I just review them again and again to understand that is it going in a way that I am telling my story in a right way or not, and then I re-edit it again and again. And it was another process of creation for me.
Raghed, you were obviously the editor. Can you speak to this as well?
Actually, Ati did most of the editing. I took care of a lot of the text, and the intro, the outro. But exactly what Ati was saying, it was such an interesting project because we were making it on Premiere for editing. Ati was animating on Photoshop. I was making stuff on After Effects. But then we were also doing the same things on, like, we were making the text on all three programs. We would design it on one, we would animate it on another, and then we would re-edit it and reposition it on another. So everything was involved all the time, and there was a lot of back and forth between us. And then when the final product was done, situating it in the space. When it comes to animation, you have to create an illusion of reality because there is none. And in a way, it's easier because everything is clearly not real. It's easier to believe in a created reality. But also, if it doesn't work, it really, really doesn't work. So because we were treading real life stories, real women's issues with this world that we were inventing, the font had to be right. The color of the font had to be right. We changed fonts so many times to get to the right one in the end. The pacing of the intro and the outro, which situate the story in the real world as a premise, also took us probably even more time at the end that we could have expected because it had to hit right emotionally. So yeah, it was combining all of these things together to create something.
Thank you. Andrew, talk to us about the editing process for Echoes.
Well, this was the first film I'd ever made. I'd never even shot anything on a camera before. I didn't know how to use a camera. So this is also the first thing I'd ever edited. So it was a huge learning curve in trying to, kind of like Raghed said, just you find what works and what doesn't work. And like, why doesn't this font work? I don't know. You change the font. Oh my God, that's perfect. So there was a lot of that for sure. I think the two biggest things I kind of learned were in theater, someone can stand on stage with no set, just a light on them, and the audience is captivated. You put that exact same performance in front of a camera, and you have that one camera, one shot on that person for 3.5 minutes, the audience is bored. The medium doesn't translate. Again, speaking of medium. So I shot all this footage of the singer singing because I'm like, well, it's a musical. I'm going to shoot the singer singing. And then in the editing room, I'm like, I'm bored. I'm bored after 15 seconds. So I need to cut away to something. And so that's when a lot of the reshoots happen because you just learned, like, this is not holding my attention. I'm lost here. That was huge. And then people might argue, like in Les Mis, the movie, Anne Hathaway, they did a one-er of her, one shot, no edit. just singing her song, but one, it's an iconic musical, it's an iconic song, and it's Anne Hathaway. So it's going to command attention already. And these are the things that we have to learn and we have to understand as we go. And then the second thing I learned was, I had 2 points. I don't remember, but I will say that visual storytelling is huge because, again, these singers are singing their feelings, but what is actually happening? What is the backstory of what's happening? So I don't want to keep relying on this, but there's a lot of visual storytelling of the person is singing, and then we flash back to their life before, and it's something that's used in film all the time. But I find in musicals it's a big help because we're also conditioned and used to music videos who do tell stories in this kind of way. So it's kind of just pulling from everything to, again, make it work as best as it can. So it was a huge learning process, and Jeff has something to criticize me about. Go ahead.
No, not at all, not at all. But I think this might help you. I don't know with your second point, but one of the rather large bits of editing that Andrew did, and in fact it's storytelling, was from the stage production, which in Echoes, like I mentioned before, is 3 time periods, right? Telling sort of 3 stories that are similar in theme. In the stage play, they ran through chronologically, but in the film, Andrew decided that didn't work. And so he decided to intercut and edit the storytelling between the 3 eras throughout. And I don't know if maybe that's maybe you could talk a little bit more about why you decided to do that.
That's a great point. Really, the only reason I decided to do it was I got bored watching the story chronologically on film. On stage, it worked, and you're interested. The stage production we did was very stripped down. You know, had we had a massive $10 million, $20 million budget with a giant cast and costumes and swirling stage, perhaps we could have interspliced. But again, you take with what you have and you make it work. Another great example, there's a song in there about the American Civil War and one of the first Black battalions to fight in the Civil War. And I just didn't have the budget, time, or resources to get that many actors together. So I just shot one at a time. And just had one to try and evoke that feeling of, hey, we're all here together and this is, you know, all of our stories. And it was a long struggle to try and find a solution for something like that.
Atefeh.
I just want to add these things. When you're making animation, sometimes you are in doubt that should I use medium shot or should I keep everything on long shot? How can I show the feeling and the emotion of my character? So, and how can I show it with painting? And how do I want to, draw it or and make it interesting. So it's a kind of challenging when you are using different kind of like, it's a kind of, when you are using mixed media, it's other challenging that you have during the editing. And sometimes you need to ask your crew to go and shot something and then bring it for you. And then again, you work on those and painting, adding painting and other materials or collage to the shot that you need to use. And I had this challenge during during the editing, and I could remember that I asked my producer to go and reshoot 2 or 3 scenes again for me because I understood that I need to get closer to the character.
Thank you. Taien, I want to bring you in. When it comes to editing your work, how do you go about it? And then also when you're teaching others, how do you, critique and offer feedback when mixed media is such a mixed bag when it comes to offering solutions and editing advice?
Well, that's like a case-by-case basis, right? Because it's like one one advice does not fit all, depending on what the students are trying to do. I always say that editing is actually my favorite part of filmmaking, or whatever the heck I'm making, media making. It's the most like writing for me, right? Where you can get your voice known. You have your cuts, your rhythms. All that is like very similar to making sentences. How long are your sentences? Is it a poem? Is it a prose novel? All those things come into play. So definitely has to do with like the aesthetic of your work, right? Is there going to be lots of shortcuts, or is it going to be long shots following the characters? And all those things give different feelings, different aesthetics to what people are trying to do, for sure. One thing I am interested in, though, because I've been doing VR lately, right? Getting into VR. And one thing I am surprised at, there's like a lot of overlaps between film community and the theater community when it comes to VR. There's like a lot of work being done in theater right now in VR because there's no frame, right? There's no cutting. There's like no real frame. And this is something that theater artists know how to instinctively deal with, how to direct attention when there's no specific cutting or editing. That might be something you might want to try, like to mount a musical in VR, because it's like, wow, I can imagine like your movie, right, happening in 3 time frames around you, and then turning your head and seeing like these performances. That might be really cool. And also in VR right now, there's a lot of mixed media happening. So like 3D, 2D animations being brought into the space, like environmental storytelling. That's like something that's being explored a lot these days in both theater and film. So I just wanted to throw out there as another medium that you might be interested in exploring, that maybe in a few years we'll see a work from you in that space. I would be really interested to see that.
That sounds like sriracha ice cream right there.
The age-old sriracha ice cream coming back.
Yeah.
I am a huge VR fan, and I think it is the format for blending everything together and having the most fun experimenting, especially because the rules haven't been written. So everybody's at the table writing them together. We're in our final moments together, and so I want to, ask what's next for everybody and how people at home can kind of check in on your work. Andrew, let's start with you.
I got a lot of projects in the pipe, probably too many. I'm really trying to focus on musicals. I do have one just straight romantic comedy script that I'm working on right now as well. But basically, I've got 2 or 3 more musicals coming, a couple of films as well that are written. They just need to be produced. And you can find me on, I guess, Instagram. I'm not there much, but my last name .Andrew, I think is my handle. I think. I'm sorry if that's wrong.
Thank you. Jeff, I'll toss it to you.
Yeah, I will be appearing in all of Andrew's films that are upcoming. No, I don't know if I am or not, but we go back a long way. I'm an actor in the stage production of Come From Away that is happening in downtown Toronto. Of course, the pandemic has stalled that, and we are hoping to bring it back. So that would be my next sort of main thing. In the time between, I do a lot of auditioning for film, for television, for commercials, for voiceovers, all of the above. Yeah. So, and I teach as well. Like I said, I teach at Sheridan College in Oakville, and in the musical theater program there. So voice acting, you name it. Jack of all trades, master of none, and happy to jump in with a bunch of artists.
So we'll be seeing Jeff. Atefeh, what about you?
Yeah, Raghed and I, we both have a company. So he's not only my sound designer, he's like he's my business partner. too, and we have a bunch of projects in our hands. I'm working on another animation, and my feature film. I accepted in Mickey Moore residency to from TIFF festival, and I'm like working on my feature film there. Also, we are trying to work on Consister and develop it as a like TV series, and yeah, we are working on that. We are pitching our project here and there to find our money to make it.
Raghed.
Yeah, you can catch our company. It's called IDRA, IDRA. It's idraproductions.com. And through it, we're working on a couple of short animations on my feature film and Ati's feature film. And as Ati said, we're in the early development stages of turning Home Sister into an animated series, an anthology that addresses really interesting topics that are presented in beautiful animation styles. So keep an eye out for it. Thank you.
Amazing. Last but certainly not least, Taien.
So I do like so many different things. It's hard to say. Right now I'm doing like a locative media project, which is where you locate, you attach media to GPS spots. I'm doing a project in Port Hope right now, interviewing Port Hopians and geolocating their interviews to different spots around the town. So when you walk around with this app, it's like a phone app, and you'll hear that. I'm also doing a projection, a VR projection dome. I'm developing that right now, getting more into like virtual production things like Unreal Engine. All that spurred on as well by the pandemic, right? The new ways that people are working in the pandemic and not having to be together in one space, but creating these spaces together virtually. So that's the next new world.
Thank you. And thank you all for partaking in this conversation, showcasing your work, and having your faces at Real World Film Festival. It's been amazing. And again, everyone at home, thank you for clicking this panel discussion. My name is Samah Ali. You can connect with me on Twitter, the only platform I'm on, at Sister Samah. And in the meantime, enjoy more films and enjoy more discussions. We hope to see you very soon. Bye.